At this time, I'd like to ask Tom Davies, the Director of the Land Water Conservation Department. He's going to give us an update on his department.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Tom Davies and have with me tonight one of my staff members, Andy Marcini, and he's going to be covering part of the presentation tonight, and we're going to be talking about our shoreline inventory that we did. About 2 years ago when I was here, one of my last slides, it said these are the things that's what's happening on the horizon. And so for about a minute or so while, Andy, are you hooked up yet? You want to do that? I just wanted to touch base on those things that were on the horizon that are now on the ground. And one of those was a thing that we call total maximum daily loads. And basically what that is it's a ranking of what the amount of pollutant load that a water body can actually absorb or take and still remain what the EPA calls fishable, swimmable waters, meet the water quality standards. Those things are happening now in the lower Fox River watershed, which is basically the Nina Slough and some other things, and if we have time, you'll see some of that tonight. The other thing that's happening is increased regulation on agriculture, which is tied to the total maximum daily loads. That was the other thing that was on there, one of, or two of four. We have additional tillage setbacks now for landowners where they have to maintain a no tillage setback. We have additional restrictions on milk house waste. We have additional restrictions on what they call process wastewater, which is anything basically that water touches while you're on the farm or on a dairy or whatever. Those things need to be contained or managed and treated. So our world, as far as working with landowners and farmers, is constantly expanding. The other thing happened to do, or has to do with our municipal separate stormwater sewer system, or MS4. We deal with that for the highway department. Basically, we were always talking about dealing with sediment, and on the horizon was they were going to also include now that we have to account for and treat for the phosphorus. And so that too is coming down the pipe. But the last thing, and what Andy's going to talk about tonight, was an inventory of the upper pool lakes, a shoreline inventory. And so rather than concentrate on all the different things which I presented the last time, what we're going to do is just kind of give you an update on a couple of those things. And this is very interesting how they did it. Andy and Chad Casper from our department were out in a boat for many days, but Andy's going to cover that, and if possible, if we got a little time yet, we'll try and cover some of the things that we used as far as GIS and modeling to select the farmers that we're dealing with in the lower Fox River watershed to implement the TMDLs. And so with that, I'll get out of the way and cut Andy loose.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Tom. And as Tom mentioned, I am a GIS technician at Land and Water, and I'm going to hopefully get through a couple demos for you, and I'll just jump right in. I forgot my clicker, so bear with me. So GIS, if you're not familiar with it, Geographic Information Systems, essentially it's a system of hardware, software, and people that we use to map and analyze and model our world. And most of you are using GIS, you may not even realize it. If you're using Google Maps, if you're using a GPS, that's all part of GIS. Some of the recent changes that are really exciting to us is the mobile GIS. The fact that we can now use our smartphone to collect data is amazing.
You got to speak into the mic.
Sure. When I began in the field of GIS, we needed a GPS was on your backpack. Okay, if you wanted to get data, you had to download it from some government agency with a high-powered computer. So the advances are incredible. Crowdsourcing of data is another term that's being used. essentially where the general public can add to a GIS database using an app on their phone. A good example is some cities are using like a pothole finder. So if you're driving along, you hit a pothole, you can pull out your smartphone, hit the app, maybe take a picture. It goes right to the streets department. They know where that pothole is, and it can go and get patched. Lastly, another exciting development, UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, also known as drones, are being used. I think it's going to be very exciting in ag. There's a lot of FAA regulations that we're looking into that, as far as what can be done and what can't be done legally, but I think that's certainly the future. The fact that you can get real-time imagery and understand things like crop damage on the spot. You know, you don't have to wait for a big fixed wing aerial survey that may only come around every 2 years or so. So just to reiterate, GIS is going mobile. The advantages are it increases productivity both in the field and in the office because we're not having to double enter data. In the old days, it wasn't unusual for us to have to collect data, whether it was, you know, pen and paper or on an instrument, but then you'd have to go back to the office and you'd have to cable it up and upload it and sync it. Now everything's happening real time. It's going right to the database. Web-based mapping, that's all part and parcel of the whole ability to interact and make cost-effective GIS. This software is very expensive. Web mapping allows us to put a GIS on your desktop, and all you need is an Internet Explorer, okay? So that's very cost-effective. We're looking to introduce that throughout the county as well. Project identification and tracking, that's one of the little demos that I'm going to be showing you, hopefully, in a few minutes. So as Tom had mentioned, two of the projects, one is completed, the pool system inventory, which we completed in 2014. It was GPS'd, basically the entire shoreline system. We used a handheld Garmin and a camera and about a 17-foot John boat, and we went out, and it was really a lot of fun being out there, but we got some really good information. What it is it's a tool that our techs can use right from their desktop to really get a quick look at where was that spot that I saw, where might be a good spot for our next project, and also highlight some of the good things that we saw along the way as well. And then lastly, the resource concern mapping is a project that's kind of in the pipe right now. It's something that involves a number of components. Tom had mentioned it with the modeling that we're doing. There's a larger database initiative that's going on regionally through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And it's also in conjunction with the TMDL, which is the total maximum daily load, which is going to be a regulatory piece that everybody in this area is going to have to be aware of. It kind of began in the Chesapeake Bay area, and now we're having to deal with it. So an overview for those who are maybe not familiar with our great resource here, the Winnebago system. Over 165,000 acres of surface water, 17% of total inland surface water, and 9% of that is in Winnebago County. And this is a great slide, I think, really demonstrating and illustrating the change of landscape. And you see on the left-hand side in 1941 compared to 2000 how much more open water there is. So really illustrating loss of wetland, increased lake levels. So these, this wetland loss and shoreline erosion, some of the causes, we have the higher lake levels, wind wave action, our increased boat traffic, all contributing to these erosion factors. And ultimately, some of you may have seen some of these things in our waterways, these algae blooms, which are really degrade the environment and are a threat to our wildlife, and certainly don't help our property values. So now a little bit more into the meat of the project. We covered over 150 miles of shoreline. We took over 3,000 photos, and it took us about 17 days, almost 3 weeks to complete the field work. Some of the new technology that we used was the ARC Collector app, which is the actual mobile app that I'll hopefully get to show you. And then as well, ArcGIS Server and ArcGIS Online, which would be the web-based piece of the technology. The old school GIS, the foundation, we've been using that for a long time at the county, but these were a couple new pieces that we added. And our project was also a partnership. Calumet County did basically the east side, their portion of Lake Winnebago, and when I bring the map up, you'll see that they actually had a little bit different methodology than what we did. And part of it, I think, is due to the scope of our work. We had a lot more ground to cover, so to speak. We had a lot more shoreline to cover than they did. And I think what we did was really a well-focused approach, and I think is going to benefit us really, really well. So during the inventory, we essentially were looking at three main things. Vegetative buffers, which would be in the middle of the screen there, and that could be native plants, it could be trees, it could be shrubs, essentially creating a barrier between your lawn and the waterway. And we looked at the width, and this was all done by estimating. So we're going along the boat, we're looking at the shoreline, we're taking pictures about every 5 or 10 seconds so that we have a continuous shoreline. And then if we see something, we tap our GPS and we mark the point and we enter what we're seeing. And all of this is automatically being uploaded to our database. Erosion rates, if we saw some areas of erosion, we would note that, and the same for the man-made features. So now, cross your fingers, we'll see if the technology gods smile. There it is. Okay. Oh, come on. Let's see. I do. It was working before, but that must have turned itself off. There it goes. My hotspot turned itself off. So, if you want to see the shoreline inventory, all you have to do is go to our website, Land and Water Conservation. You'll see there's a best management practices and the shoreline habitat link. Click the photo inventory, and now you'll see our area. So when you open the map, you see there's a little about describing what you're seeing, and then you'll see a series of points. And I'm just going to walk through a couple of the tools and give you an idea of how to navigate. It's really user-friendly. If you've used any kind of online mapping, it works pretty intuitively. So the first button I clicked is essentially showing your legend. So we've got our erosion types in the lines from low to high, vegetative buffers, the widths that we observed, and then any erosion areas that we saw along the way. So I'm just going to zoom into an area of interest, and we'll take a look at a couple spots. So you'll notice as I was zooming in there, the aerial photo became higher resolution and clearer. And as well, you'll see all those little dots pop up. All those little dots are photos. So you click on a photo, and you'll see what we saw in 2014. And then you can click on each one of those points and get information about it. So I just clicked on that little red triangle, which was a severe erosion spot, and you'll see that we noted where it was, the date, and it was a severe. I click on the photo associated with that spot, and you'll see, in fact, it was really a bad gully wash that we saw. Now, that in itself is valuable, but then when you combine it with the aerial information, you really get a whole picture of what you're seeing. So we zoom in a little bit closer, and now you can see some of those ditches that are leading right to that gully. So obviously, there's some things that are going on in that landscape that we could probably help that homeowner address. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to jump into the next part of the demo, but feel free. This is totally public available. It's just go to our website and go to that shoreline habitat link and go to our photo survey, and you can check it out.
And do you want to explain how you use that timer for setting your distance and things like that while you were taking
Oh, sure, yeah. We just had a little timer that would basically beep every 5 seconds for us to snap a picture. We had a tripod set up in the boat, and the camera was GPS enabled, so essentially every photo has that geographic coordinate, and we would just, beep, click, so you would go to bed at night hearing a beep, so. So now over to the resource concern mapping. This particular project, like I said, is ongoing, and it does include several phases of work. The first of which was this eval model, which is erosion vulnerability for agricultural lands assessment. I think I've got that. It's a mouthful. And that is a GIS model that was created by the Wisconsin DNR. And it's a pretty sophisticated model. I had to take some training to learn how to install it, use it. We focused on the lower Fox watershed, and I'll bring up a map in a minute showing you where that is. And we thought that would be a good place to start because it's a fairly small area, and we could really kind of test our methodology and what kind of tools we were going to use and how we were going to kind of manage this process because it was all new to us. We ran the model. We had to interpret the results, kind of refine and rerun the model. We created maps that basically prioritized what we thought were potential areas that might have some issues on the landscape. Once we did that, we created this ARC collector app that's kind of now in a beta mode where we can go out and start using our device, whether it's a smartphone or a tablet, to collect data. And again, this is similarly part of a larger regional database that we're going to be building. So now this is a look at the Lower Fox watershed. And starting from the northernmost, you have the Mud Creek outlined in that green. Then just below Mud Creek is the LFRM5, which just rolls off your tongue. I don't know why it's called that, but that's what it is. And then below that, we've got the Neenah Slough, which is a larger subwatershed. So we ran eval basically within each of those geographic boundaries.
The middle one stands for the Lower Fox River main stem number 5. So that
Thank
water
you.
runs right into Little Lake Butamore, which is considered part of the lower of the Fox River.
So as far as what went into the model, essentially your data sources, you've got elevation as a key component. LiDAR data is recommended. LiDAR, if you haven't heard of that, is light detection and ranging. It's essentially a form of sonar that basically, or radar, that is very, very accurate and collects just huge amounts of data. We're actually going to be getting some, I believe, should be this fall. We should have that data. Or you can use standard elevation data, as Tom likes to put it, poor man's DEM, which I created just from topo data, and that worked just fine for us. Precipitation data, we gather that from NOAA, basically 10-year precip data. Soils data is, it takes into account soil types. And lastly, national cropland data. And I always try to remind myself and others whenever we're working with a model. I love modeling, whether it's, airplanes or cars or anything like that, but in GIS, it's still just a model. It's a good idea of what we think is out there, but it doesn't replace ground truthing. It doesn't replace going out in the field to check. But it really does help us to focus our efforts so that we're not spending time where we necessarily shouldn't be. It helps us to engage citizens. We've created these maps, and we've held some meetings based on this eval tool to get some engagement on where some of these things might be occurring and what we might do to correct them. So this is an example of the raw output of the model. So basically red bad, blue good, right? And this is really, it's great information like this, but it really needs to be taken one step further and made a little bit more easier to understand and more presentable, so we classify it. So now this classified model result is a little bit more user-friendly, easier to read, easier to understand, and we've taken that aggregate raw data and aggregated it and applied it to an index and applied it to the boundary of a farm field so that we can say, hey, this particular field, as it's classified, you know, we've got a severe issue here that we should probably check out. It doesn't tell us exactly what that issue is, but based on the model, we can look and say, well, it could be soil type, it could be slope, it could be any number of those variables in the model. So, project status. We've completed the Lower Fox model. We've conducted our initial landowner meetings just last 2 weeks ago, Tom. And we now have this test app that we've got for field use, and I hope to demonstrate right now.
One of the things that the modeling does too for us when you're dealing with landowners, and we actually, from the modeling and from the prioritization that it does, it gives us an index or a ranking on where the possibility of erosion is probably most likely to occur. And by using science, it takes out some of the bias. When you're meeting with landowners, and one of the things we had in the meeting was, why am I here? We show them the eval and we show them the science. It's not one way or the other that we know your farm. It's that based on the modeling, we're trying to prioritize, and we've contacted you because this is telling us that if there's going to be erosion in the area, based on your rotations and your soil and your slopes, you're one of the guys, the sheer dynamics or the person, your farm is more susceptible to erosion. So we want to prioritize our efforts because there's lots of land. So we wound up with 64 actually landowners that we started with, that we invited to 3 different meetings.
So this is, I'm going to demonstrate the app and ignore my 60,000 unread emails. I get a lot of spam. So we open this app, and you'll see these are a number of the apps that we have. And I've got the resource concern map on top, and then I heard some mention earlier about some of the Winnebago County trees. Winnebago County Trees was actually using this app that we developed to manage the maintenance items. So I'm just going to open the resource concern map, and now if you should be able to recognize that eval inputs that we had created, I can zoom in, and these are some of the higher areas of concern in red. And similarly, just like the other shoreline map that I showed you, you have the ability to turn layers on and off. And what's of interest to me is this pinkish line, which is essentially a stream power index. So I'm going to turn that slew off. So now you'll just see that line. So how this is helpful is that we can have our agronomist or our tech have that map with them in the field, and as they're going out to the field, they can go directly to where these areas of concern might be, rather than, you know, in the old days of, you know, you've got your maps in the plat book and everything in the pickup truck, and that's great, but then you're out in the field and you're walking around, and every field kind of looks like the next after a few hundred of them. But this way, we know exactly where you are. And then, let's just say that instead of being in this great historic building, we're actually out in the field. I'm going to zoom to where we are, and you'll see it automatically takes us to our location. And because of these rather thick stone walls, I'm not getting a very good location, but it's incredible. If we were outside, it's very accurate. It really is. It's uncanny. I'm pretty impressed with it. So what the person would do in the field, if they saw something, a concern, they would add a new feature. Let's say they saw some erosion. They would go ahead and indicate what they were seeing. Let's say they saw a gully. They would add some notes. They could add any kind of estimates as far as depth, et cetera. And then finally, they can also take a picture of what they're seeing. Okay? That all gets done, submitted. The updates are sent. This is now in our GIS. I don't have to do anything. It's there. Okay? I want to change it. I can go ahead and I can change it. I can edit. There's my item. I can go ahead, I can edit, I can delete, I can change the information. All live, all right to our database. So it's really slick. You know, we're really impressed with what we're able to accomplish with this, and think it's going to be a great tool for us.
We better end it there.
Okay.
Do we have any questions? About the department or any other things, Paul?
Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Davis, and Andy. This is just an amazing presentation. I have several questions which I've accumulated to try and get some answers. Now, in the work that you're doing, do you coordinate much of this work with the East Central Regional Planning Commission? Because it seems to me that this is an area that they would probably consider a division of their activities.
Yeah, I'm actually very well acquainted with that group. This particular application, no, but I know that they're using a lot of the very same technology in their work efforts. So we do, you know, communicate. We have monthly user group meetings, and I know the bunch over there pretty well.
And whatever has come of, or how may have you been involved with what was attempted as a partnership to assess Lake Winnebago, a partnership with Calumet County and with Fond du Lac County. There was an attempt to set up a private organization to assess.
Are you referring to weigh in on Winnebago? Is
That's actually being, the county executives are actually working on that right now as to how that's all going to.
Now, that was something that was rejected by the county board for participation. Am I you know, on the same
There was a funding request
connection?
for that, for an individual as a coordinator, and
Yes.
we, our county chose not to, the board chose not to leave that in the budget, and, but things are going forward with the other two counties, and we're trying to figure out a way to get everything kind of
Now,
homogeneous.
does the data that Andy collects go into this matrix of analysis for,
Well, it'll be, yeah, it's inventory data, and what it does for us is it gives us the ability now, as we look at shoreline projects, we're very similar to what the eval on agriculture. This inventory, if we need shoreline work, will help us identify where the worst situations are and what we should be addressing first.
and another question too is, how is the department and how are we
They're
adapting?
complaining you have to talk in the mic.
How are we adapting to those DNR regulations, the sealing of shoreline zoning and involvement, where local ordinances and resolutions have been limited by the state legislature, saying that you can't restrict the footprint of a property in the event it needs to be replaced. How is this impacting the work that?
It doesn't really impact our work as much as it would be involved with planning and zoning and their shoreline zoning jurisdictions, so to speak, based on that.
Well, it does impact mitigation efforts that counties would set as a standard. That you can't exceed the standards of the DNR.
Right, and again, that's the stormwater and the shoreline zoning, and that would be handled by the zoning department. Typically, if we're working on a shoreline, we would be working with that person to do a restoration on the shoreline or possibly put in a buffer of native plants. When it comes to actually regulating the shoreline, then it would fall under the zoning department as far as the shoreline zoning or the DNR. If in some cases, Paul, what we are going to do sometimes requires a permit. And then we would have to work through a Chapter 30 permit with that landowner in order to be able to do some of the things we want to do on the shoreline. But that other part, we don't really get too involved with. It's more through the shoreline zoning.
Thank you.
Why have they picked Waverly Beach to be one of your where your drones are gonna be operating first of all? No, Paul lives at Waverly Beach, that's why I said. Supervisor Haig.
Surveillance, Mr. Chairman. Just one other thing before we go, because I'll get shot if I don't say it, because Tom's here. Tomorrow is Conservation Field Days. It's at the Norbert Rich property that's part of the Winnebago School District now. I think it's on, is it Oak Hill and Quigley? Or which? Oak Hill and Gino Road on the southwest 40. But the kids from Winnebago High School, or Winnebago grade schools come out, and our staff is there along with DNR people and NRCS people, and they go to different stations and learn about resources and wildlife and forestry. And it's just a wonderful thing, and Tom was instrumental in helping us get hooked up with that at the school now. So if you get a chance to go out there, there's a session in the morning and a session in the afternoon, and you can take it in. It's pretty cool.
Supervisor Haig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. He had made mention of the tree inventory that was done through the same type of a GIS system.
I think Andy actually developed the system for parks and for facilities that they use. That was done by Andy.
The question at the facilities meeting was, why is this necessary? Why is it necessary to put this, boy, I don't even know what the word is, that data is so deep. Why is it necessary to put that on a county facilities website on each and every tree? You know, I get the same feeling when I see this. Why is this necessary to put it on the county website, and how much does it cost to put there? How much does it cost to develop this and put it on the website?
Well, I can't really answer really much of your questions other than the fact that this isn't on the county website per se. It is on a web server that the county does host, so it's not on the website. And as far as why, for instance, facilities or parks is gathering that information, I honestly don't know. They asked me to build it, and I did. I mean, I imagine they're using it for their management, you know, keeping track of maintenance on their trees.
Right, I certainly understand that. It's just, there has to be a price tag to the taxpayers of Winnebago County, though, when it comes to what does it cost to actually build the software? What does it cost to facilitate inputting the data? And I say that because one of your slides up there showed the algae bloom. And at the end of the day, is the water really getting cleaner? You know, is stuff really being accomplished through these elaborate tools? I mean, Supervisor Eisen was certainly correct that this is some pretty cool stuff, but at the end of the day, what is it accomplishing?
Well, what it accomplishes is it allows our staff to work a lot more efficiently and to manage information and to get to problem areas. One of the biggest issues in resource management is keeping track of inventories and inventory items and keeping track of maintenance. By keeping track of when maintenance is occurring on a tree, for instance, having that access right away, you save time and money by not missing maintenance or by maybe over-maintaining something. It's a really cost-effective tool. It's been shown, and we haven't done an ROI study, but it's a cost saver. And as far as the cost of the technology, ultimately, by having web maps, we're going to reduce licensing fees, which are really, really high. So I mean, I see it. I don't have a cost analysis in my back pocket, but this is a cost saver. And to develop these things is not really that expensive. It's very, very quick deployment.
Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. And Andy and Tom, I'd like to put you and the board and the citizens on notice that the lake fly is back to the North Shore.
Supervisor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing I have to say about algae, and if this is coming from what you guys are doing, it's wonderful. My district runs right down to the lake, to Lake Winnebago. And it isn't any more than, 7, 8 years ago, where I would get calls from people, and you're not going to believe me, you will, but these people probably won't believe me. I went down to see what all the problems were about, and there was a dog. God only knows how. The dog walked across the algae. It was a medium-sized dog. Walked across this algae, never broke through it, just walked across and got to the other side. Now, nothing like that seems to be happening anymore. I know we still have algae, and we probably will. We can't get rid of that. But it certainly is better than it was. I've been on land conservation for, 20 years or something like this? And I think these guys are doing a remarkable job and coming up with every kind of money there is to save taxpayers money and not having any more dogs walk across Lake Winnebago from one side to another. Yeah, but would you know, I went down there to see what was going on and didn't take a camera with me. If I would have had a camera, I probably could have been on television and everything else. Because you don't see a dog walk across algae like they're walking across the plank real often. So, hallelujah, you guys, keep up the good work.
Okay, thank you.